When they got to Kabar, they went to Salam's house by night, having locked every door in the settlement on the inhabitants. He was in an upper chamber. His wife came out and asked who we were. We told her that we were Arabs in search of supplies. She told us that her husband was in bed. We entered and bolted his door. His wife shrieked and warned him of us, so we ran at him with our swords as he lay on his bed. When we had smitten him, Abdallah bore down his sword into his belly until it went right through him. By the God of the Jews, he is dead. Never have I heard sweeter words than those. We returned to Allah's apostle and told him that we had killed his enemy. We disputed before him as to who had killed him, each of us laying claim to the deed. Muhammad demanded to see our swords, and when he looked at them, he said, "It is the sword of Abdallah that killed him. I can see traces of food on it."
Deceiving victims is standard operating procedure for Muslim militants. Attacking defenseless civilians is the very definition of terror, and so is gloating. Today's Islamic terrorists are as eager as Muhammad's original henchmen to claim credit for their deeds. Ishaq Sirah recounts a third Muhammad-inspired execution.
Ishaq. Halfway to Medina, Uqba was called out to be executed.
Since the other prisoners were being held for ransom, Uqba asked Muhammad why he was being treated more harshly than the other captives.
The Prophet said, "Because of your enmity to Allah and His Prophet." "And my little girl," cried Uqba in bitterness, "who will take care of her?" "Hellfire," Muhammad responded. At that moment he was decapitated. "Wretch that you were," Muhammad eulogized. "You scoffed at me and claimed that your stories were better than mine. I gave thanks that Allah has slain you and comforted me."
Allah condoned the murder in the 8th surah of the Quran, the 68th verse.
Quran 8:68. "It has not been for any prophet to take captives until he has slaughtered in the land."
Allah approved kidnapping for ransom so long as his prophet slaughtered first. Uqba said something Muslims didn't like, so they murdered him. No wonder authors, journalists, and politicians are afraid to critique Islam. Looking to rob a Jewish community for a second time, Muhammad had one of his militants torture an innocent man. The tale is recounted by Ishaq and Tabari.
Tabari and Ishaq. The Prophet gave orders concerning Kenaya to Zub-Ayar, saying, "Torture him until you root out and extract what he has." So Zub-Ayar kindled a fire on Kenaya's chest, swirling it with his fire stick until Kenaya was near death. Then the messenger gave him to Maslama, who beheaded him, then to Bakati. The Prophet said, "The hellfire is 69 times hotter than ordinary worldly fires." So someone said, "Allah's apostle, wouldn't this ordinary fire have been sufficient to torture the non-Muslims?"
You will soon discover that the Nazi Führer and the Islamic Prophet had more in common than just using fire to eradicate Jews. Beginning in the Mein Kampf chapter, I will compare Hitler's manifesto with Muhammad's so that you might know how stunningly similar they are. By so doing, you'll come to appreciate the consequence of tolerating Islam. Let's take one more example. Ishaq Sirah speaks of the murder of another journalist, Asma bint Warwan. She spoke critically of Muhammad, telling her tribe to be wary of him.
Ishaq, you obey a stranger who encourages you to murder for booty. You are greedy men. Is there no honor among you? Upon hearing those lines, Muhammad said, "Will no one rid me of this woman?" Umar, a zealous Muslim, decided to execute the Prophet's wishes. That very night, he crept into the writer's home while she lay sleeping, surrounded by her young children. There was one at her breast. Umar removed the suckling babe, and then he plunged his sword into the poet. The next morning in the mosque, Muhammad, who was aware of the assassination, said, "You have helped Allah and His apostle." Umar said, "She had 5 sons. Should I feel guilty?" "No," the Prophet answered, "killing her was as meaningless as 2 goats butting heads."
These events are but a handful among hundreds of horrific tales of barbarism described in the Islamic Hadith. Many are far worse and include the enslavement of children, rape, and mass murder. What you are going to read from Islam's most holy books will begin as laughable. The creation accounts are dim-witted to the point of being delirious. The religion's desperate grope to convolute the lives and times of biblical patriarchs to establish a sense of legitimacy for its scriptures, shrine rituals, God, and prophet is pathetic. As the chronology marches on, you'll meet Qusay, Muhammad's great-great-great-grandfather, and discover how he invented the 5 pillars of Islam as a mystic scam. The story gets particularly interesting at this point as we uncover what Islam has to say about its prophet's abused childhood. As a result, Islam, by its own admission, becomes a money-making scheme. Everything is driven by an unquenchable thirst for revenge and a man-sized lust for power, control, sex, money, and praise. And that's not my opinion, or even an interpretation. It's what the Islamic scriptures say. Then the religion becomes very dark. Muhammad's first Quranic revelations are demonic, fixated on disgusting depictions of hell. Devils called jinn, pain and punishment. And that's the good part. The moment Muhammad and his gang slither out of Mecca, they pick up the sword and never put it down. What you are going to read from the Islamic scriptures will shake you to your core. You will be revolted and terrified, especially if you're a Muslim. And that is the purpose of Prophet of Doom. I want the world to know Muhammad, Allah, and Islam as they are presented in their scriptures. But that's easier said than done. While the average terrorist knows the Quran and the Hadith nearly as well as I do, the vast majority of Muslims do not. Peaceful Muslims have been fed a fictitious picture of their prophet and God, one that's wholly inconsistent with their own scriptures. Clerics have lied to them, just as they have lied to us. Yet, as I discovered in my meetings with them, the jihadists have memorized the verses you are going to read. So if we want to know why they kill and how to stop them, we must come to understand them too. Otherwise, we're flailing at the wind, spilling blood and coin while they grow more resolute.